Imagine if the key to getting your lectures more exciting and impactful wasn't in your slides or your teaching style, but was in getting your students moving. That's right, I mean actually getting them up and out of their seats and moving in the classroom. In this video, I'll share some practical ways that you can introduce movement into your lessons and hopefully improve student engagement levels. If we haven't met before, my name is Claire. I am a reader in physiotherapy and I've worked in UK universities for the last 10 plus years. And I help lecturers improve their teaching practice by breaking down effective teaching strategies that make a real difference to student learning. And here I offer you the top 5 ways I use movement in my classroom to boost student engagement. So the first one I use is think, pair, share, but with movement. So you might be used to using this already, where you get students to have a think about a question on their own, you then pair them up with their neighbour and ask them to share answers, and then you ask some of them to share back with the whole cohort. But you don't necessarily have to do that activity sitting down. So you can actually get the students to have a think about it on their own. Then you could ask them to stand up and go and find them another person in the classroom that they can then share their thoughts with before coming back to doing that whole cohort feedback. The second option is a gallery walk. So that's when you could post questions, prompts, ideas all around the classroom, and then you get students in groups to rotate around those different parts of the classroom and they can add their thoughts as they go. Now, gallery walks work really well if you're doing a team-based learning approach because you can get the teams to be working on an application exercise together. Then you can ask them to go and blue tack that to the walls around and then get the students to rotate around and vote on which poster they think is best. If you want to know more about team-based learning, please check out my other video. It's a really specific pedagogic strategy, but is brilliant for engaging students. My third suggestion is a 4 corners activity. So you can assign a different opinion or viewpoint to the different corners of the room, and then you go and ask students to stand in whichever corner of the room they think is the right answer, or they feel most strongly about, or they think, their values feel most aligned with. Then they can go to those different corners, and then you get them to have a conversation with the different people in those corners. So that's just another way that you can get students moving. The fourth option, which is a variation on 4 corners, is what I call opinion spectrum. And so that's when you get students to line up in a classroom alongside a spectrum of whether they agree or disagree with a question you've posed to them. Now, I do this in a couple of different ways. I do it with my first years as soon as they arrive at university, and I ask them, where has your learning come from to date? Has it come from kind of school teachers and lessons, or have you been really self-directed in your learning where you've self-taught yourself? And I get them to line up on where they kind of sit on that spectrum of learning. I then ask them, okay, where do you think your learning is going to come from at university? And I ask them to move a little bit on that spectrum. And then I say to them a third time, okay, I want you to move again based on where you think your learning is going to come from when you leave university. And that's just a really visual movement way for students to see how they're going to be taking more and more responsibility for their learning at university. The other way I use it is when I teach reflective practice, because this can be a little bit of a Marmite type topic, like people either really like doing reflection or they don't like doing it. So I get them to stand on a spectrum of people who like reflection versus people who only do it because I make them do it at university. And again, that can prompt some really interesting discussions. So I will then have a cohort conversation around, well, okay, why are you standing there? What's your views? But you really have to set up those activities well so that people don't feel judged for wherever they stand on the spectrum. So it really needs to be, they need to be free to share their personal views on it. But it works really well in understanding where students are at and making them commit to what they believe in. Suggestion number 5 is a stand-up poll. And this is probably the one I use most because it's a great way to just inject some energy into the classroom. So instead of just asking students like, yes, no, what do you think about this? You can get the whole group to say, okay, do you agree with this? Stand up if you agree. Sit down if you disagree, whichever way you want to do it. And this is really helpful because some of those earlier suggestions I've made are a bit unrealistic if you've got huge cohorts. But I've done this with cohorts of up to 500 students in big lecture theatres, and you get the whole cohort to stand up and then sit down if they think this is the answer or that is the answer. So that can work brilliantly. But I do want to be clear with all of these activities, as with everything else, inclusion matters. So if you've got some students who have mobility challenges, or maybe they're in a wheelchair and so they can't move to other parts of the classroom as easily as their peers, be prepared to have backup options so that everyone can be included in these activities, because that's so important for students. And I found that these strategies not only improve focus, but they actually make learning more engaging and fun for students. But you do need to use them in moderation. You can't be using these in every single session that you do. And by keeping inclusivity in mind, you can create a classroom where everyone has the opportunity to join in. So if you do try out some of these activities, I would love to hear how you get on. So please feel free to post your feedback in the comments below. They won't work for every classroom. They won't work for every lecturer. But again, I think one of my values as a lecturer is I keep wanting to experiment and try new things, anything that will help my students access learning more easily and more fun, really. So we've spoken here about how you can get the students moving, but if you want to hear more about the teaching energy scale so you can be thinking about how your energy influences the classroom, then please check out my other video, which I'm hoping will appear here if I can set it up correctly. So hope to see you in another video soon. Thanks for watching.